All righty. So today I am joined by Ryan Brault, and he has seen some amazing results over, I don't know, how long has it been, Ryan?
Gosh, well, since we've been working together, or since just in general. Um, so I think it's been probably a couple of years, a little more than 2 years that I've been coming to see you and doing the bod pod thing. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, overall, it's I've been sort of on this journey for a little more than a decade in terms of just
Yeah.
improving my health and fitness. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Because it's not just like I set out to hit this goal and go,
yeah. Yeah.
right? Yes. So, how did your journey begin? Like, what was kind of like the turning point for you that you decided I got to make a change?
Yeah. There definitely was one. And it was so my wife and I were in Washington, DC, and we ran into, well, there's a friend of ours from college that lived there, was working there at the time. And so we got together with her, and we were down at the National Mall, and so she took some photos of us, and like, oh great, and so then it was actually the first time I was ever tagged in a photo on Facebook.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, I looked at the photos and I was like, oh, it's like, okay, there's this certain way that you see yourself when you stand in front of the mirror, and like certain ways that you stand, and this image that you have of yourself. But then like someone else takes a picture of you and you see that,
Right.
and it's a little different than what you had in your head. And I was like, all
Yeah.
right, something's got to change. So
It's
yeah,
like the camera adds 10 pounds, but then social media or online,
yeah,
it brings it a little, makes it a little bit more real, right? Yeah.
exactly.
So was that
Yeah,
just kind of the point that you're like, I got to do something, like it started the
yeah.
next day, or how did you make that happen?
So I probably waited till I was done with the trip to to get
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, pretty soon after that, I was like, all right, things have got to change. I realized that um, needed to pay closer attention to what I was eating. So obviously, like the first things came with food and exercise, right? And I think I just gave.
You just
Can you see that?
thumbed
I
up.
just gave myself a thumbs up. Gotta love the iPad technology where I think it'll disappear after a while, but just gave myself a thumbs up. So
Yeah.
apparently I'm on the right track. So food and exercise. I was like, all right, so I probably should start, like, I don't know, at some point I was like, I should, start tracking food. And I kind of looked at different apps and downloaded the Lose It app and just
Mhm.
started tracking food. But I think even before that, I was just like, you know what? I need to, I was like, I knew that this wasn't going to be like, I'm just going to do all of these things and it's just going to
Mhm.
be quick, fast results. I knew it was going to be a process. And I also knew that it was going to take a commitment, and it was going to take building good habits that were going to get me
Yeah.
there. And so, so the very first thing I was just like, you know what? Every day I'm going to do some sort of movement. Like, I was like,
Right.
and I kind of just said in my mind, all right, like, I don't care if it's like a 15-minute walk, just something.
Mhm.
Like, I'm going to move every day. And
Yeah.
so what I found is once I got moving, usually, you get in motion, and usually it was more than a 15-minute walk, but occasionally
Right.
that was it. And it was like, all right, I at least did something.
Yeah.
And then I started tracking food, and um, so
So it wasn't
yeah,
everything all at once, right? It
no,
wasn't like just like I'm eating nothing but kale, I'm hitting the gym
no,
2 hours a day, like,
no,
things. It was just kind of that baby step stuff, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, awesome. So as you were going through, even if it was just the last couple of years, how
yep,
did you work to overcome any plateaus? So if you started to see that you weren't making the progress that you wanted to see, what were some ways that you overcame those plateaus?
yeah. So And I would say, just for kind of paint the bigger picture. So, 10 plus years ago, my weight, I was at 225 pounds. Um, right now, I'm a little over 165. I had gotten down as low as just under 150. Um, so, found some of what I lost, but I've also um, changed body composition a bit. And so, uh, now what was the question? It's like, let me give you
How
some
did you
background information, and
how
then
did you overcome those plateaus, right? Because it wasn't
yes,
just like,
yeah,
I'm going to start walking
yep,
every day and then just magic
yeah,
happens, right?
yep,
So when you started to feel stagnant, what were some things that you're able to do to overcome?
yeah. So I would say, initially, because I was kind of doing this on my own for quite a while, just like kind of doing my own research, tracking things, doing various things. And it was really in the last couple of years where I said, okay, it's time to really take this to the next level. And that's
Hmm.
where, that's when we met, and it was like, all right, I'm signing up for the annual pod membership, and I'm coming in monthly. And
Hmm.
so I think one of the things that I found is that with those plateaus, first of all, I've learned a lot of things in the journey. And so
Hmm.
now, as soon as that happens, like as soon as I feel like I'm hitting a plateau, there's all of these sort of mental questions that go on. Like, one,
Hmm.
is what does that mean in terms of plateau? Is it like my weight is plateauing? Well, if my weight's plateauing, well, what's happening with my body composition? So maybe it's time to get back into the
Hmm.
bod pod and get another assessment, because the truth is, always happens when you get that piece of air. It's like, well,
It's the
this
truth
is
machine.
yeah, yeah. It's like, well, I can tell myself like, yeah, I've been eating pretty good, and I've been tracking,
Yeah.
but I have a pretty good idea, yeah, and it didn't go off plan too much. And but then, like, the yeah, the truth is there once it come in. So, but I think some of those things that I think about, like when I'm hitting a plateau, actually one of the first things I learned when I started doing coaching was like, it was like, oh, you need to eat more. I'm
Hmm.
like, what? Like, I was doing all these things of calorie restriction, and
Hmm.
therefore my metabolism had adjusted pretty well, as it tends to do. And so it was getting used to not eating much. And so it's like,
Hmm.
oh, first thing I need to do is eat more and actually build that metabolism back up, get it working. And then, in terms of plateaus, I go, okay, if I'm hitting a plateau, I just, some of those mental questions I ask, like, am I tracking? Am
Hmm.
I am I drinking enough water? What's
Hmm.
my stress level? Am I getting enough
Yeah.
sleep? Like, I just kind of
Yeah.
go through all of those questions, because I've learned that every single one of those things
Hmm.
impacts um, the the process in terms of
Yeah. So it's
getting the
kind of
results.
going back to those basics, like having that
Yeah,
checklist and the stuff that we always think we're doing, and maybe we get in the habit of it, but
yeah,
we maybe have gotten a little lazy about it, right? So then
hmm,
going back and holding yourself accountable to that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome.
absolutely.
Alrighty. So then during the pandemic, you were killing it, right? But then you added to your family. So what happened there and getting back on track instead of just letting it continue to slide?
Yeah. So, good question. So during the pandemic, again, kind of paint the picture of where I was and where I got to. So at when we started working together, so I went from about 175 pounds to 150. But during that time frame, I increased my muscle mass while
Hmm.
cutting my body fat percentage and the actual pounds of body fat literally in half,
Yeah.
during that time frame. And certainly wasn't without a lot of hard work. But yeah, so we have three kiddos, all adopted originally from Taiwan. One of the things that because I've tracked my weight for so many years, one of the things that I realized after we adopted our second kiddo was, oh, I have this tendency to, like, we get a referral. It's like, oh, this is the kid you're going to adopt. And there's 9 months to a year before we bring them home. And my weight tends to, from that point until come home, my weight tends to creep up. And I realized that is basically a function of the fact that historically I've done a really good job of dealing with stress with food.
Yes.
And so finding other ways to deal with that. And so I really, part of it was, I was like, all right, I'm committed this time. I'm not going to repeat that pattern, because I know that's a pattern. So I didn't, up until the point where we traveled to Taiwan, we quarantined for a couple weeks, and then I was like, I can get bubble tea every single day. Oh, there's bubble tea ice cream? What? Like, oh, Uber Eats for dinner every night. Like, oh, we're trying all these new foods. And so really allowed myself to just kind of throw off the reins. So it was like, all right, I'm just gonna enjoy food and just go back to some bad habits of eating whatever sounds good at the time. And then certainly the results followed going back.
But you were able to get back on track, right? When you got back, was it around Christmas time, or it seems like it was the middle of the winter?
Yeah, it was after. So we left in January, come home in February.
Yeah.
So after I got back, it was like, all right, gotta get back to. Did do some exercise while we were gone. So definitely kind of kept that up. Maybe not quite as much, but really was like, all right, time to get back at it. And so I think that's when actually signed back up. I was like, all right, doing another year of the pod. I'm going to be back in there, because I know, again, when I know that, hey, next Tuesday I'm coming in, or in 3 weeks I'm going in, it's like, all right, those numbers aren't lying.
It's that accountability.
I can,
Yes.
So
how is it a little bit different this time, though, now that you've brought kids home, right? You have an additional responsibility. It's very similar to having a baby, right? As far as like, now you're managing more kids, right? And you have a little bit less focused time, maybe, right? So like, because I think earlier in my office, you were like noticing your Peloton scores. And you were like, I'm not going to, like, how was I doing that? Right. It's a little bit different now, right? Yeah.
It is. It is. So I think one of the things that I've gotten back to, which is a habit that I've, for time periods, I'm really good about. And then it's one of those habits I end up rebuilding, but gotten back to getting up early. I'm up at 5 right now in the mornings, and so that's when I get my workout done, and I find that really sets the tone for the day. For me, I found with exercise, I just got to the point where I realized, like, if I don't get it done first thing in the morning, the chance of it happening in the evening are just not
just like goes downhill the rest of the day, right?
And the other thing with exercise that I've learned, and I think this goes for a lot of things, but I've found that, generally speaking, there's definitely some solid research out there that says, don't be accountable to somebody that is also accountable to you. And what I mean by that is, like, so like, I can think of so many times where I'm like, oh yeah, like the answer is, like, I've got to have, I want to get up early. So like, I got to convince my wife to get up early. She hates getting up early. So finally she'll have a weak moment. She'll be like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll get up early. And then, like, she's like, what was I thinking? I don't want to get up early. Like, I'm done. Like, and so then it's just me by myself. Or I have a buddy, like, I'll find somebody, that's like, oh yeah, do the workout partner thing. Like, we're going to work out together. And it lasts a little while, but then, like, it fizzles out, because what happens is you let each other off the hook. Like, it's like, oh, did you do that thing? No. Did you? Yeah, I didn't. Oh, hey, I didn't feel like getting up today. Okay, well, I don't feel like getting up tomorrow. Pretty soon it's done. And so I'm like, that's the other thing, is I really had to just get to the point where I was like, this is my journey. Like, I have to own this. It has to be important to me. And I can't have my success tied to anybody else, because it just doesn't, it's not sustainable. It doesn't work.
It's kind of finding that intrinsic motivation, right? Like, it's good to have an accountability partner, but ultimately like, yeah, you're right. It's your
Yeah.
journey. You have to drag yourself through the mud, right? I mean, you're gonna,
Yep.
there's mud, there's plenty of mud. So,
Yeah,
alrighty.
there is.
Tell me about your favorite go-to snack. Like if you're traveling, what's your
Yeah.
favorite like snack to grab either somewhere or take with you?
Yeah. So I'm kind of boring when it comes to snacks. If I'm not traveling, like in the morning, it's the same thing like almost every day, which I need to, vary that a little more. But it's like vanilla Greek yogurt,
Mhm.
and with a handful of pecans, chia
Mm,
seeds if I haven't had those in my smoothie in the morning, um, and then some berries, or if I'm like grabbing that on the way out the door or something, or sometimes at the office if I don't have fresh fruit or something, then I'll eat a few if I need a little more carbs, have
mhm.
instead of berries like some prunes or some dried apricots or something. And then on the road, um, or like in the car, often I might have like a bag of like prunes or some other dried fruit, dried apricots, something, and then some almonds that I can just grab because those stay well in the car.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and then same thing on the road. Occasionally, I used to bring RX bars as well,
Yes. Oh, I
which
love those.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, but I found like just it's like okay, they're great, but they're not like shouldn't necessarily be having them like I'm out of town for the
Yeah.
week, like
Yeah.
every single snack. But
Yes.
they're really great, like quick go to. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah.
Yeah. What about when you eat out if you're traveling? Do you have like a go-to meal or something you
Uh,
look for on the menu?
it's a good question. So it really depends on like what. So the kind of the journey I've gone through is like you know there's times where I'm, you know, upping my carbs and that
Yes.
kind of thing, and there's other times where I might not, might have a bunch of carbs like in the morning or in snacks, but not in the evenings. So, like if I'm on a cut and I'm like, sometimes it's easy because it's like okay, dinner is basically protein and veggies. So it's like, all
Yep.
right, I could have a steak and some broccoli, steamed broccoli, or I could have some
Yeah.
chicken, or and then um uh so if I've got a decent amount of carbs I'm eating, like chicken teriyaki, ideally
Yeah.
not loaded with a ton of teriyaki sauce, but
Yeah.
and then another thing that I've learned is like I used to always think like salads are so great, and they are, but like I've also learned that sometimes a sandwich is actually better than a
Yeah.
salad in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
It depends what you're looking for, right? If you're looking for
Yeah,
calories or if you're looking for carbs or if you're watching
yeah,
fat or sodium,
yeah.
yeah, that can
Uh,
totally affect
and
it. And
what's
sometimes
on the
those,
salad?
yes,
Like
a
I
lot
love
of
Caesar
times those
salad.
salads, yes, they'll have like way more calories than like a burger, right?
Yeah,
So that's something to always kind of look ahead and know, what you're getting there, right?
yeah,
All
yeah.
righty. So what piece of advice would you give someone who is just kind of like starting their journey? Like where you were 10 years ago, what would you tell yourself
Yeah.
then?
So I would tell myself actually some of the things that it's interesting because I think some of the things I would tell myself were the things that I did tell myself.
Yeah.
you know, it, and some of that was that it was going to be about building habits and doing
Mhm.
things consistently. And sometimes it's frustrating because it's like, really, like, do I really have to go back and build that habit again? In fact, I don't know if I
Right.
completely answered your question earlier, but like one of the things that I think is different about this time, you kind of asked, was like, is that I know how, like, I've built, like, sometimes I feel like, oh man, I lost this progress and like, gosh, I got to do all this again. But then I remember like, oh, it's not all lost, because even though maybe some of the bod pod results went backwards in terms of the body composition pieces, I've learned a lot along the way. And so I know what to do. I know I can do that. So it's a matter of just
Mhm.
having the discipline to put those habits back in. So I think I would say, have some, some grace for for yourself, um,
Mhm.
and know that it's about habits. Um, I also track a ton of things. So
Yes.
from
Yeah.
water to food.
Yeah.
I don't track all the time, but I find
Mhm.
that as soon as things are not going in the right direction, like it's time to get back to the basics of
Mhm.
tracking
And then you
and
start tracking
the
and
consistency.
everything kind of falls back in line, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So,
So
all righty, Ryan. I don't see any questions. So I thank you very much for your time. And if you guys have any questions for Ryan, feel free to reach out to me and I can get you in touch with him. He's got a super motivational story that I feel like resonates with a lot of people. So with that, we're going to log off and I'll say good night. Thank you.
thank you.